Hello. Eh? I don't know. It seems. Let me see. Um. Hello. Um. Okay. So just the slides. It seems. I don't know. It's okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hao Huang, Associate Professor of Social Sciences, and welcome to the Illinois Tech Social Sciences Great Problems, Great Minds seminar series. For this seminar series, we will go online. So the audience online can submit the questions during the seminar by typing in the chat box. We will open the floor to the questions at the end of the seminar. Today's seminar is our first social sciences seminar series lecture in this semester. We will introduce the interdisciplinary works done by Professor Ron Henderson's team to examine how to plan and design cities in which autonomous vehicles safely interact with humans in the driverless city to have a positive social impacts. Today's speaker, Ron Henderson, is a professor in the Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago, where he also served as program director from 1995 to 2022. He's an international leader in landscape architecture design, history, research, and education. His broad range of current research includes the driverless city project, gardens, and contemporary urbanisms, and landscape-based urbanisms. He is a prime investigator on the driverless city project, a multidisciplinary research initiative funded by the National Science Foundation and the Laya Prize, which investigates the urban design implementations of driverless vehicles. He is also co-PI for another NSF grant investigating equitable access to water infrastructure in Chicago. He held previous academic appointments at Harvard University, Pennsylvania State University, Tsinghua University, and the Rhode Island School of Design. He is also founding principal of Real Landscape Architecture. So currently, welcome to Professor Ron Henderson to give us this very interesting project.
Hello, everyone. Okay, let me get some light. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this august lecture series of great minds and great problems. You know, we've been working kind of as a group for a while. Let me see. Things are advancing. Are the slides advancing for the people on Zoom?
I think so. Currently it's sharing, so I think, can,
Because they're not changing here in person. We just need to get some things synced.
yeah, I think, we need to connect. Oh, think, just now it's work. Oh, okay, now it works.
Great. Good job.
Move.
That works. Yes.
Move or not?
Yes, that's
Oh.
perfect. Okay.
Sure. That. Slice is closed. Let me open again. It seems, yeah, there's not opening, so. But I already copied to my actual, so should be. It seems to me it's my PowerPoint. It's my PowerPoint. It's my PowerPoint. Not sure. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So only open your, your, yeah, it's kind of, it's not, cannot be open. Actually, I already copied to my, that's so funny.
We'll make it work.
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's open there, but I don't know it's why. Oh, maybe it can. Okay.
Okay, there we go. Thanks, everyone. So this is actually what's going to happen with driverless cars, is they're going to have technology glitches, and they're going to be all over the sidewalk. They're going to be like crashing off into the lake. Elon Musk is going to turn off the satellites and then we're going to not know where we're going. But we're going to stay techno-futuristic, optimistic, and see what the possibilities of the driverless city could be. Again, Al, thanks for the invitation to be a part of the series. I'm really happy that you asked me to participate. And yes, I'm Professor Ron Henderson in the Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program at Illinois Institute of Technology. The project started with a NIRE Prize grant, a competitive grant internal to Illinois Institute of Technology with colleagues from architecture, Institute of Design, law, transportation engineering. And that was followed up with a group that received a National Science Foundation grant. Yes. Oh, yes. So we're going to hit record.
Yeah, so since just now is yeah, we need a, oh, it is a recording. Okay, great. Okay, so
Okay.
we can just
Perfect.
continue.
And we were able to build another team internal to IIT with the robotics laboratory, Matt Spenko, and with the navigation lab led by Boris Pervan, to build a team that received a National Science Foundation grant about 4 years ago, $750,000, 3 years, to look at the urban design implications of the driverless city. We have a website, the driverlesscityproject.org. So why does this topic have relevance? These are the same spaces. So on the left is Daniel Burnham and William Bennett's proposal for the Chicago Civic Center as part of the Chicago plan in the 19-teens. A great civic center. In the foreground, just between the trees and the buildings going left to right, those of you who know Chicago would know that that's Halsted Street. Less than 40 years later, the vision for that space changed dramatically, whereby the advancement of interstate highway system appropriated that space for what we now know as the Jane Byrne interchange. So it's very easy to see in this example how transportation policy and urban policy are connected. I would just say for us in the Driverless City Project, we, among other things, we don't want this kind of value system to be repeated. In fact, maybe we hope that some of the results of this value system can be undone as we leverage a new technology to reshape our cities. So driverless cars, electric cars, whatever you think about their timing for rollout or their viability, again, we're going to say a little techno-optimistic and just say, let's try and leverage them to meet the values that we have as landscape architects, urban designers, planners, and residents of cities. So we'll guide city planners and landscape architects in planning and design of cities. The Driverless City Project will educate roboticists that the technology they are developing can have a positive societal impact. So we all could picture futuristic city visions. We've seen them in film and movies and comic books and anime and any number of places. And maybe we're doing a little bit of that. You know, there's a little bit of craziness in some of these futuristic propositions. But we are wearing computers around our wrists now. So again, you never quite know where Dick Tracy was prescient or simply kind of out there. But there are clearly public concerns, right? A few years ago, India decided to ban driverless cars in order to protect jobs, not about protecting people. Certainly one of the biggest upsides of autonomous and driverless cars is they should be able to see and read each other as cars. They should also be able to see and read people. We have tens of thousands of vehicle deaths in the United States each year. The hope is with driverless cars that will trend toward zero. So that's a pretty big upside to technology. Navigation, safety, and risk, landscape architecture, and urban design implications. So our National Science Foundation grant proposed that we look at State Street in Chicago as a representative urban environment to see how we can navigate robots through the city safely. We chose State Street because it's that great street of Chicago, but also because it has a pretty interesting transect. At the bottom right is our campus here at the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is a low-rise, sparsely distributed building area. Trees are taller than most of the buildings. Then we hit Interstate 55, the South Loop, which is a little more mid-rise, maybe 5 to 8 story buildings. The Loop, of course, the birth of the modern skyscraper. Then across the Chicago River to River North, where there are super tall buildings. And then the Gold Coast, which is dense residential before State Street dead ends into Lincoln Park. So that's our study transect. You'll see State Street over and over and over again today. Cars can navigate with GPS easily, as long as there are 4 satellites that it's able to receive signals from in order to build its position. That's pretty much okay. So out on an interstate highway, it's pretty good. But when you get into an urban environment, the satellite signals bounce off buildings and they betray your position, which is why at the 19th floor of my building, when I call an Uber, the Uber thinks I'm in Lake Michigan, because the satellite that's picking up my location is coming from a different angle, and it projects me down to the ground and I land in Lake Michigan. Okay, how the screen just, yes. Did the share screen go away? People on Zoom? Yep, nothing's moving. So Alexis says they can't see the slideshow. Here we go. Let's try it again. There we go. Alexis, is that okay? Okay, great. Thanks, Alexis. This is actually Alexis's drawing that's on the screen now. So Alexis, your drawing is so powerful, it stopped the whole presentation. So, working with our friends in the robotics lab and the navigation lab, we were able to chart the kind of visibility of the satellites from State Street. Again, we need 4 for GPS to work. We have to use GPS. Again, it works in an open field, but in the city, it starts to become problematic. So you can see through most of State Street, which is the left to right street, the integrity is really pretty low as we transition from the mid-rise south to the loop. And if we look at one place in particular, State Street just below 18th Street, and we look at the satellites moving over time, where that's white is where you can see the sky, which means the satellites are 4 satellites are able to see you. But you can see at different times of the day, it's not really very good. So we can't just pick our times to drive our cars into the city. We need to have them accessible all the time. If we took a cross section through State Street, the horizontal datum being State Street, the black at the top is the height of the buildings. So at the far left, there's one little tall building, that's the Galvin Tower at IIT. And then as you come up, you can see the Sears Tower and Trump Tower and the Chicago River. You can see that skyline. Below that in blue is where GPS is pretty effective. And where it's in red and orange is where GPS doesn't really work. And you can see there's a little bit of a blended area at the south, right there. A kind of transition zone between GPS and LiDAR. So we have to go from satellites to something that's on the car itself. So if we zoom in at a place there, again, at between, say, Cermak and 18th Street, the Hilliard homes are on the just east of that. And you can kind of project to the right from that map onto this time frame. So really what this is, in left to right, are little 5-minute increments of time over the full day that would show for that stretch of road what the GPS availability is. And you can really see that is immediately after kind of getting into the denser part up by 18th Street, we go from a blue zone to the orange zone. Blue zone, GPS good. Red zone, GPS bad. And that's kind of what that looks like. So we are looking at how the car arrives into a dense urban environment. And that's particularly the problem that we were trying to solve, is how does the LiDAR read its urban environment? And how do we help the car read its urban environment in a way that would also amplify low risks for humans, be able to build space for more trees, more green infrastructure. So how could we use this new technology, again, towards some of the values that we may have? So we're out there with a LiDAR kind of testing textures and shapes, found things that, LiDAR performance Dark colors weaken confidence of data. Reflective street signs have a high signal strength. Mirrored surfaces can displace the LiDAR, so they could be misread. Frosted glass diffuses the signal. Tree trunks are distinguishable, but not the tree canopy. So say and you'll see later, we maybe are looking at how trees could be one of the ways that LiDAR is read. So we were looking at LiDAR and GPS and tree canopy. Of course, when we're trying to read the urban environment, we have a multitude of things: tall buildings, medians, and lighting, and trees, and planting, and people, and signs, and utility trucks. And then the maintenance guys show up, and then there's another obstacle, and then climate, and there's rain, and there's snow, and then there's events. Things shut down, and we all party in the streets. How do we accommodate all of those conditions? So at a very basic level, what we're really trying to do is have a car travel down a street, project a LiDAR beam, and read landmarks along the sidewalk, kind of like a barcode. A more complex version would have a multitude of layers, more players in terms of who's on the road. Maybe that gets more complex, more like a QR code kind of diagram. Here's Matt Spenkel's old BMW, outfitted with LiDAR, which we were able to move up and down. And we did a little bit of this modeling ourselves, which you end up with these point clouds. Here we are on the IIT campus. I don't know who's driving, that the LiDAR is kind of sideways, but I hope that was the LiDAR and not the car. But you can kind of get a sense of what is legible. Tree trunks for sure. Here's LiDAR reading in the field in front of Crown. And then here's a dynamic modeling of the car going down State Street, reading the trees that are in red. So in this model, the car is moving through State Street. And the same thing here. And you can see how many landmarks LiDAR is reading with each condition. So how it just said that the battery is running low. Do you have power? Oh, power up.
Yeah.
No. So we can read the number of landmarks that it's able to read at each interval. This work was done by visiting scholar Bao Ching from the Xi'an University of Architecture and Technology, who was here working with us for about 1.5 years. We then brought these questions into our architecture and landscape architecture design studios. This is a studio that was led by Professor Nilay Mistry as an advanced studio, which asked the questions: how can urban public spaces be designed to serve human needs and social equity? How can we use mapping tools and navigation software to understand and create design interventions? And what design opportunities exist in order for balancing navigation with meaningful civic spaces? Here you can see a long portion of State Street laid out on the street. They were looking at this part of State Street, which is really River North and the Gold Coast. The white square block is the former parking lot site across from the Holy Name Cathedral, which is now a 60-story building. And this is some of the work of Valerie Clark, for instance. over the 20th century, our streets have become a series of parallel lanes with dedicated and distinguished transportation systems. So if you look at a photograph of a street from 1900, there are people in the street, horses in the street, wagons in the street, trams in the street. It's a swarm. And through urban design policy and transportation priorities over the 20th century, somehow that flock dynamic became a series of parallel lines. So if driverless cars don't hit people, can that system loosen up again and we can experience the city in a different way again? That may reclaim more territory for people, for trees, for water infiltration, for birds, playgrounds, and less necessary for vehicles. So it's kind of a shift from the linear city to the slalom line city. And of course, you can see what happens when we could expand that territory. There's the site there. And Binliu and others, this is a proposal for a kind of transportation center / logistics delivery site on that parcel. Or Valerie Clark's proposal for a more vertical forest that then is also occupied with logistics and driverless city conditions. Designing for people and autonomous futures. We've had a whole series of partners, both universities, different disciplines, different degrees, external collaborators, all kind of asking at one point, what if? What if cars could interface with hotels? What if, it's another one of those, your car was a tour guide. You got in your car and you said, I want to visit all of the best hot dog stands in Chicago, and it just drove you around for 5 days, taking you to eat Chicago hot dogs. You do that, right? We were sort of more interested in what if there's some implications for water infiltration or remediation of urban heat island or increase in urban tree canopy biomass and opportunities to sequester carbon. After all, Elon Musk asked, he would donate $100 million for a prize for carbon sequestration technology. And of course, we know let's just plant some trees. Capturing carbon and growing urban forests. And this is research led by Alexis, who is on the call today, who is dual degree, Master of Architecture, Master of Landscape Architecture graduate from IIT, who's now here, I think completing his PhD. So here, we're looking at another piece of State Street and looking at the landmark requirements so that LiDAR will work. Again, blue is good. Well, the red is the bad part. So if we zoom in to here, this is actually in front of the MTCC here at IIT. We can see that the first findings, the risk was not very acceptable. And we needed additional landmarks. So one idea would be, okay, on the left is a current photograph of the space in front of the MTCC, and on the right is a proposal to plant a few trees to add more landmarks in a place where there aren't landmarks. So that's what we did. We planted 3 trees. And that's just kind of a mock-up of the system, right? We could model it, test it, and then lo and behold, we could actually figure out where's a few places in the city that we might want to plant some trees. Of course, there's a lot of socio-environmental benefits to denser trees. And just test one thing here. And people like the Chicago Tree Initiative report provides a lot of information. Open Lands, the Chicago Department of Planning and Development, and others are starting to chart the tree density, biomass, shade equity, and other factors in the city. Dense urban environments like the Loop are covered by tree canopy, maybe about 8%. Bringing the estimated yearly benefits of around $500,000, compared to Lincoln Park, a 21% canopy cover, around $1.2 million in economic benefits. A modeling study of the Northeast United States in New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore also confirmed that urban tree canopy will reduce the urban heat island by as much as 6 degrees centigrade. Urban forests in Chicago. It's about 17%. And if we look at one of those factors for carbon sequestration, it provides about 21 million tons of carbon decarbonization, equal to maybe $4 billion a year. Areas with commercial and industrial activities, obviously, maybe have the least carbon sequestering. And if we look at neighborhoods, North Park at the far north edge has the most canopy coverage, around 35%. Douglas, which is us here at IIT, it's about 19%. And the Loop, 10% at best, and that's probably including Grant Park. So if you take away Grant Park, probably not much at all. So if you looked at the city overall, the public parks cover only about 6%. You can see a little green dot screen in the middle of that diagram. And streets and roads are 35, like over a third of the city is streets and roads. Well, as landscape architects, we know that streets and roads are the largest area of public space in our city and in most cities. And it's contested real estate. Buses want to be there, people want to be there, taxis want to be there, bicyclists want to be there, private car drivers want to be there, birds want to be there, trees want to be there. And so it's a full third of the city surface. So it's a pretty substantial canvas for exploration. With only 6% dedicated to public parks recreational accounts for 8%, yeah, streets are a significant site for work. And we can see that differentiation. Here's the IIT campus on the left and the Loop on the right. And how we might transform a kind of current condition, you know, even just by filling in the street trees, let alone working within the realm of the vehicular lanes as well. An urban heat island measurement, red is hot without the trees. Adding the trees, of course, is going to also reduce the urban heat island effect, particularly along the edges. How might we get rid of the red, right? One problem we could simply ask is, how could we eliminate all of the red in the urban heat island throughout the city? Air quality has a similar measure. Healthy urban waters and unforeseen circumstances. We also leverage this research for a grant, again with Alexis Arias, Betancourt, and I, for the Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant, where we were able to look and investigate the urban water implications of the driverless and autonomous city. Internal combustion engines have an incredible effect on urban waters because every gas station is essentially a Superfund benzene soil leached site. Even the cool looking gas stations can be problematic. So what's going to happen with those when the internal combustion engine becomes obsolete and we can eliminate one source of water pollution? Could these sites become places of water remediation as they go extinct? So we asked some really smart people like Ricky Burdett and Karen Lutsky, who's going to be here on Monday to talk about the Great Lakes. David Lampert, who we're working with, Hal and I are both working with David on a new NSF grant looking at water equity. Andrew Watkins, a landscape architect, Justin Keller at this point was at Calumet Stormwater and Metropolitan Planning Council, an array of other people. And we were asking them that question. We just asked them what would be the implications of driverless cars and water? And really none of them had thought about it before, even though they were in kind of high policy positions. So Catherine O'Connor was very clear. She's like, in the middle. If there's a couple inches of water on the street for a couple of hours, that's much better than in somebody's basement. We want the storage. We know we have to protect vehicles, but 2 or 3 inches throughout the city, that's actually a wonderful reprieve and gives the sewers time to catch up and convey this flow. Now imagine if the billions of dollars spent on the Deepwater tunnel had been spent in simply allowing 2 or 3 inches of water to slowly seep into the ground throughout the city. We would have transformed the environment of the city, not simply engineered billions of dollars. It's already at a questionable capacity. So in Chicago, there were over 8,600 calls for water in streets in 2020. So do the math. What is that? 8,600 divided by 365 is 220 calls a day, 200 calls a day. 6,100 for flooding damage and 800 or so, over 800 for water quality concerns. And if we take parking spots, maybe driverless cars don't need to park, they can keep driving around, or they can be leased or some other condition. If we looked at the parking permit spots in Chicago in pink, they're about 222,000, which equals 841 linear miles. So if you're in the UK, you can drive pretty much all the way north-south. If you're in Chicago, you can drive to New York. That's a lot of, now it's a parking lane wide, it's a 10-foot wide lane, but that's gives you a sense of scale of the area that could be available to transform the urban environment by dealing with autonomous vehicles in a way that would improve environmental and social equity. Like, heck yeah, let's do it. So what if driverless cars don't need street parking and that street parking can be retrofitted? That goes without saying, deal that's made for city parking, where it's really owned, I think, by Morgan Stanley and not by the city, which means the city would have to buy that space back. But we could do things like this, playgrounds and bicycles and plants, festivals. We can capture more water. So with the current infrastructure, we can catch about 26 gallons per minute. And with just simple retrofitted of street parking, reduces the runoff to 21 gallons. So it's about a 20% reduction very easily. Water runoff would decrease from 5.8 million gallons per minute to 4.7 million gallons per minute. Again, maybe about a 18% change. So if we were to take this even to a larger level, what would happen? So here is at the center of this image is 35th Street going left and right, State Street and the green line going north and south. And the areas overlaid in pink are parking lots for Illinois Institute of Technology and the Chicago Police District. So quite a substantial amount of parking. Here's the green line L. So what if we took that parking, knowing that driverless cars, you could program them, say, go away, and they go away, or pool, move all together, because you don't have to be inside them, so you don't have to get out of your car and open the door. They can park 2 inches apart. De La Salle High School gets out at 3:30 in the afternoon, and there are basketball courts. And the cars are programmed to get off the basketball court at 3:30, so the kids can play basketball. So you could program these surfaces with cars having a more temporary use and allow all kinds of other programming to happen, because we can program them. They can drive by themselves. They can get out of the way, which could make a much different kind of urban block, a kind of soft edge city that, again, interrupts the linear continuity of the 20th century urban pattern. So the vehicle activity can change throughout the day. The parking space activity can change throughout the day, and we can begin to reconfigure space in a much more flexible way. Lots of resources. Okay, I'm about to finish up here. The Driverless City Project, investigating the urban design implications of driverless and autonomous vehicles, designing for people in autonomous futures, transforming 20th century transportation infrastructure into 21st century human infrastructure. Great, thank you. So how you said people could drop questions into the chat?
Yes. Chat box. Let me see if the currently they have.
Oh, I see somebody looks like they were trying to get admitted.
Oh, it's already finished.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, it seems no, I didn't see questions here. So,
Any questions here? Maurice?
Since you're thinking about how you can program cars and parallel gather spaces, are you rethinking two things like the shape of a car? Because now you don't need a mirror, you don't need the engine possibly, you don't need the trunk.
So the question from Maurice Gaston is, did we think about how the shape of the car itself may change because we won't need mirrors? And I mean, we don't really need, say, in a front engine car, we don't really need the hood. Right? So a car can automatically get 2/3 smaller because we don't need to carry around an internal combustion engine in front of us. So already the car itself gets smaller. Yes, we did not look at that. But that hasn't, we did look at parking. Again, because people don't have to get in and out. You can simply call your car and it'll come. They can park like 2 inches apart. I think a current parking lot per car, I want to say, is a little bit over 300 square feet per car. And I remember we did a study where we could pack the cars in closer. You know, that game where you get an empty spot and you can move things around. Like if we did that with autonomous vehicles, we were down, I want to say, to 112 square feet per car. So even if you took a parking lot that's existing and made it for autonomous cars, you could keep the same number of spaces in, say, a third of the surface area. Now, if you also had smaller cars, we could actually accommodate our capacity of vehicle use that we sustain now. But in parking lots, parking spaces in the city, lane widths, all of those things could all change. I think the one thing we did talk about is how we may change ownership of vehicles. It may be more like Netflix, where, say a family buys a vehicle and they buy it because they know they go to the beach 10 times a year. So they need to buy a big enough vehicle to go to the beach, but they also happen to drive it around all the time. But imagine you had a subscription with Ford with like 100 credits a month. And if you're just driving to work, you can drive they still make Ford Focus, could drive a sedan. Ford's getting out of the sedan business, I know. And that's 5 credits a day or something. And you get to ride that. But then when you do want to go to the beach, for 10 credits, you can get the big Ford Expedition and load everybody up and go. But you don't have to buy, or you don't have to occupy the road with the largest vehicle that you need in your family all the time. So you wouldn't have to drive your pickup truck around all the time, Maurice.
Yeah.
Although I think it's probably part of your identity, right? So there's this other
Yes.
this other condition. Okay, Lauren we have one more in, and Lauren. Yes. Yeah, I mean, mostly what we were looking at is navigation. But really there's 3 conditions for cars. There's propulsion, navigation, there's another one and it's skipping my mind now. But the propulsion pretty much simultaneously with driverless technology is electric battery technology. We're kind of assuming they're happening together. Battery technology is really problematic. Right? Lithium is an evil thing. Is it better than oil? I don't know. I don't know. So, I think that's part of the problem. Now, will we be able to build solar roofs on cars with capacity? Maybe. Is hydrogen better? Probably. You'll be watching these battles your lifetime, because there are going to be some serious investments in different alternatives trying to win this game. I mean, we had electric cars first, and then internal combustion engine became a little more predictable because gasoline was a little more mobile than electricity. So there's a lot of investment capital going on in this game now. I mean, one of the things we did learn is that there's more patent investment in vehicles right now than there has been in over 100 years. So the technology is raging to try and figure things out, because the return on investment, if you hit it right, is just going to be enormous. What we want to do is make sure that that return on investment includes people and the planet and trees, that it can somehow reflect our values. So that's where it's really hard. So how do we do that? Well, we think we can help maybe advise cities on policies that may help guide decisions on what you can do. We also have learned, like with the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is an electric pickup truck, that when the grid went out, the electrical grid went out in Texas, a year and a half ago, people could plug their house into their truck and run the house off of the energy in the truck. So imagine a different kind of future where your car is not only, getting filled up with energy, but it could become a mobile energy pocket power plant. And then you could run your house off of it. And then the larger utilities will fight that, but then energy becomes mobile and independent. That's a crazy possible upside. Even though in that scenario, maybe it still has a lithium battery. So like, how many do we need to stack things to endure something that's not good? Does that also answer the question, how as designers we can leverage our abilities to avoid the new technologies creating new destructive infrastructures? I think that's probably it. Mohammed, do you have a question?
My question is, how do you see the future? How do you move the cars? What about parks? What about other structures and how
So the question was, how do we see the future of maybe urban public spaces in this kind of possible scenarios? I know one thing we looked at is, say here in Chicago at Washington Park, for instance, an Olmsted Brothers Park, one of the larger parks, part of the South Park system, linking to Jackson Park with Midway Plaisance. You know, it's a expansive tree and lawn and path and carriageway park that's intercepted by some pretty significant city streets now, with 6 lanes of traffic going fairly fast. Well, those were originally supposed to be horses and bicycles, and people could simply walk from one piece of the park to the other. The other thing that's happened to people in the 20th century is we were taught to walk to the corner so we could cross at a crosswalk. So our experience of the city and our experience of a park like Washington Park changed because the continuity of one side to the other. Humboldt Park is another really good example. The driverless cars aren't supposed to hit us. So maybe that experiential pattern of the pre-automobile great public parks could be brought back in a way that the parks have greater spatial and experiential continuity. So it could be a kind of historic preservation possibility as well. That's an example, at least one.
This landscape features actually how designed the parts, because actually with the GPS or the minder, they can identify these features, landscape features, and the trees. So, what's the current largest barriers to implement these things? Like you showing how when we have only some street only have 8% usually having, but others margin tree. So what's the largest barriers?
So Hal's question was, in some of our research, of course, we were looking at how trees can serve as a landmark for LiDAR navigation. And how can we find places to plant more trees to serve as landmarks? And what are the biggest barriers to prevent us from doing so? The barriers for trees is soil, non-compacted soil. So we need, it'd be great to have 600 cubic feet of soil for every tree underground. How do we get that soil? There are technologies where we can do structural soil, so the roots can actually exist under a pavement, and water can get through porous pavements, and the trees can do fine. So one thing could just be redesigning the urban surface from asphalt, from a kind of sheet water into a hole, into a pipe conveyance, to water infiltrating into the ground so that it could nourish the roots and nourish the soil, which could then feed the trees. That also slows down the flooding and other kinds of things. So I would say one of the first things that we would want to look at is the porosity of the urban surface. And then simply the area that would be available for soil. So if we were able to take, say even every other parking space away, or 50% of the parking on a block, and turn that over into much more extensive tree planting area, we could do pretty amazing work that would help navigation, help water quality, help urban heat island, and so forth.
So besides the trees, the general green infrastructure also will help.
Well, it won't help navigation, but the tree, yeah, because the LiDAR wants to read something that's upright, like a trunk of a tree. LiDAR is actually, they're mapping a lot of the surfaces of buildings. Roughly, LiDAR, say if it's mounted on the top of a car, the spread means, say like on State Street, I think we were discovering, it's going to hit the buildings at about 13 feet above the ground and like 4 feet above the ground. No, it's 15 feet. Yes. So one of the questions for us was, how do you make that consistent when you have a UPS truck parked in the way? It won't read the building. And so you get a very slim, like 10 feet to 15 feet zone where it's actually pretty consistent. There's no people, there's no cars. The city is pretty stable in this one little band at 13 to 15 feet above the ground. Because tree canopies have to be limbed up to 15 feet in the city. So you get that part of the trunk. So it'd be quite legible if we were able to do that. But if we can plant trees, we're making green infrastructure because we have to have the soil porosity. So the tree is like the Trojan horse. It's going to bring along all of the other benefits with it.
So the trees that have other.
Well, you need the trees. The trees can live in the green infrastructure. Yes. Yes.
The other question is like you mentioned at the beginning. So the currently activities in this around this cars actually there is some like from the policy perspective for some governments they are banning these things. So because of job protected job. So how can the city actually for these driving city technologies actually can bring new jobs rather than they replace jobs and how can.
Yes. So one of the questions, the question is economics and people. How do we maintain jobs and careers with the driverless city technology? Because we know there are hundreds of thousands of jobs now driving semi-trucks across the country. It's going to be one of the first automated driverless trades is going to be truck driving because they can GPS. They're already out there. That's going to be a lot of loss of jobs for people who often are from rural counties. And it's a significant source of jobs in places where there aren't other great opportunities. I think one of the possibilities is going to be there's going to be more capacity. So maybe it's docking and servicing rather than driving. A lot of people that look at this have said, we're actually going to have more vehicles on the street than less. Because, every pizza shop is going to have a car delivering pizza. Every pharmacy is going to have a car delivering uh, prescriptions. There's going to be just an army of cars driving around waiting for somebody to call them. So some people actually believe there's going to be more vehicles. What's going to be different, though, is most of those vehicles are going to be in motion and not parked on the side of the road. So we also need to be looking at more delivery and drop-off space. And we already experienced this because there are trucks parked in their lanes everywhere in every city right now that you have to drive around because we still have cars parked in every parking space along the curb. So that balance is going to have to change because the delivery mobile commerce model needs some space. So I think that's going to be another condition of change. So maybe there's some jobs around reconfiguring the city. Those are urban jobs, construction jobs. But it's a real concern because we want to keep people having good jobs so they can make livings for their families and with their families.
So what we have is the systems, and then you think we will have more space, or you think that actually we will have less space?
So Hal's question is like, that's like the biggest question. Are we going to have more space for people or are we going to have less space for people?
Because you mentioned that actually the drive this cars, and they need the space is less than from the people drive.
Right.
So which means it seems we will have more space based on.
So I think we are thinking we could get more space. I think this is where policy, politics, money and influence. The next mayor of Chicago being a landscape architect someday. Davey Friday, are you on the call? I mean, I think that's where this work ultimately needs to land, and it is landing. You know, we've handed our book to Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. He has our book. You know, I think that's the level of policy making and decision making that can represent our values. We have to be vocal, and we have to lobby, and we have to become the experts that people to understand how this could become good for people, good for the environment, and still maintain jobs, and still maintain mobility and the freedoms that are associated with it.
Then how optimally this field is
So the question is how optimistic and kind of how long. It's happening every day. Yeah, yes. You know, we spoke with somebody from Toyota 5 years ago, and they said we can do a lot of this now. Just the marketplace isn't ready for that abrupt of a change. But I know in the last 15 years of my life, 15 years ago, I got my first car that had cruise control, which was kind of crazy. And now my car has adapted cruise control, which means I don't even have, it adjusts to the person in front of me. So when everybody has adaptive cruise control, then everybody's just going to flow. We're not going to have traffic jams. All that stuff's going to go away. We just have to, you know, be courageous enough to let everybody do that. Are we ready to let the machines take over? Great, thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody that's online. Which is really Alexis is the one that's left. Hi, Alexis.
It's very, we can just,
Hey, Ron. Thanks for the presentation again.
thank you.
You have a reaction to emergency, like why you
Yeah.
actually got at one time? How would it pick up people? You get them out. Anything on a mass situation.
Well.
Ah.
There's traffic jams without any, and that's just tailgating and people stop or stop there. So if you do have everybody on a cruise control,